Hello everybody, and welcome to 28 Days to Better Chess Tactics. This is day 26, and we're getting close to the end. I'm going to give some tips and ideas of how to reach the next level of your tactical ability. And a big part of that is your calculation ability, which would be step 3 of the 4-part thought process I talk about, as well as visualization. Now, these are two separate skills, but you can work on them both concurrently once you've learned or solved a puzzle. And I have 3 ideas in this video of how you can do that. So the first here is once you've solved a puzzle and you already know the solution, so whether you've solved it yourself or you just looked it up and you looked up the answer if you couldn't solve it, it still helps to practice your visualization and calculation to go through the correct process that you would use, as well as visualizing all the moves. So I'm going to play them out here, but just imagine that you're visualizing these moves. So in this position, let's say you went through step 1 and you looked at all the threats, for example, the rook attacking this bishop. So you'd visualize the threats. In step 2, you'd visualize all the candidates. So you'd visualize rook takes, bishop takes, rook check, and then knight check. Maybe bishop takes, just all these different moves. You'd visualize them and calculate them in your mind. Now, here the correct solution is rook to h6. This is a typical decoy tactic where white is trying to decoy the queen to e6 so that he can achieve a discovered attack with rook to f8 check. So if we go back here with the knight check, there's multiple captures. Of course, this rook's pinned, so that can't take, but either the king moves or the pawn takes. So if the pawn takes, the bishop takes, and now either the king has to move, or if the queen takes, we just simply win with the discovery. And now at the end of the line, if the rook takes, we have this double attack. So we actually keep that bishop, and we're up a lot of material. Now let's go back here. So if the queen doesn't take on e6 and the king moves, for example, to h8, we can still just play rook to f7, and now we're threatening, we have multiple threats with either the queen coming in, threatening mate on g7, or if the rook takes, then we can just simply play queen to g4, covering the d1 square. And actually, black is forced to play rook to d1 to decoy the queen back away from mate. And after the queen takes, we actually end up winning the queen after rook takes, because, for example, if the king moves over, we just simply checkmate. And so after the bishop interposes and we take with the rook, we're actually threatening a double check and mate, and there's no way black can stop it except for taking that rook. So at the end of this line, you can see that there's a lot of lines from the beginning. There's a lot of different possibilities. And so if you didn't manage to accomplish the puzzle, this is the key here. To improve your calculation and visualization, to actually improve the skill in complicated situations that you might get yourself into, you need to actually work through the correct process. Now, this trains your brain to be able to do it in the future. And it's just a lot of work. You're going to have to do a lot of work, a lot of this type of work. And it's very tedious at times, but it pays off. Now, this is why if you don't do this kind of work, you can play blitz, you can do a lot of fast games that are fun, but you're not going to improve, because you have to go slow and thorough. You have to work on how your brain thinks about chess in order to improve your game. All right, so let's say after here, we simply calculate or we visualize that the king moves. Well, we just win at this point. So you'd visualize all these lines, each individual line, one at a time, and you'd simply just see it in your mind's eye, and that's definitely a way to improve your visualization. The second tip I can give is to literally memorize chess games. So for me, I've memorized about 25 chess games, and what it does is it forces your brain to clearly visualize the moves, and eventually, if you spend enough time with a game, you'll be able to see it in your mind and visualize every single move very clearly. This helps you memorize the board as well. So this game is just a 4-move checkmate, And I would recommend that you start with very simple ideas, very simple games, miniatures, and then try to progress to longer games where the strategical content is much more complicated, as well as tactics. Now, you'll notice that this kind of brain training will drastically improve your game, because even you memorize one game, you'll notice that you're thinking more clearly on each game because you're able to visualize the moves clearly because of that training. And I'm not sure exactly how it works, but I can tell you it does work, and it's quite amazing. But I would suspect a lot of it has to do with the neuronal pathways in your brain, and how when you're using that visual spatial center of your brain, when you're actually looking at a board, it's much easier. So it's like you're lifting heavy weights, and then when you're actually looking at a board and using your eyes, it becomes a lot easier. So for example, here, if we're white and we play e4, e5, queen to f3, knight to c6, it can be any move with blunders by black, basically, and then we get this queen takes f7 checkmate. So you'd literally memorize this game. You could go move by move, e4, e5, and then visualize it. Or you can even take a clear the board of pieces, and visualize those two moves. Now, a key component of memorizing these moves is memorizing the movement of the piece. So you wouldn't just memorize e2 and then it appears on e4, but you'd literally memorize this kind of movement to the square. And this is not really talked about, but it's a very crucial aspect to improving your visualization, is this specific movement. So you memorize the movement of these pieces as you see them on the board, because when we're playing on the computer, you actually do see the movement. And this really is an effective method to improve your memorization of games, as well as the visualization capacity. So queen takes f7, a very simple game, just 4 moves. Now, each game you memorize will kind of add to your sort of repertoire of visualization positions, and you'll find it gets easier. And that's the key, is that the more work you do, the easier it is to do a specific thing. So you don't necessarily have to memorize this game, but you could start with the Morphy game, Morphy versus the Duke. That's, I think, 17 moves or so. And a lot of Class A players, experts, they'll be able to recite that game from memory, because it is a key component of getting better. And I haven't really heard it talked about too much, but I'm mentioning it here because it's very effective. And it's not necessarily about memorizing the game. You can forget it, you'll forget games unless you review them, but the memorization process improves your ability to figure out new situations. All right, so I hope these tips have helped you. Tip 1 and 2. Tip 1 was to review lines and from tactical positions that you already know, as well as calculating lines that you already know. And tip 2 was to work on games, memorize games, and visualize games that you have memorized, which means you'll have to spend a lot of time with a specific game. So choose famous games, choose short games, and choose tactical games, and you'll definitely see improvement in your calculation and visualization abilities. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the future. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe for future videos. See you in the future.